There's this story I read about today on Facebook, and it reminded me of several posts that I'd made in the past. I've talked about entitlement, how when some of us Africans who move to the diaspora have family and friends back home, some of those people back home begin to feel some sense of entitlement. And then recently I also talked about Mikel Obi when he expressed himself and how some people demonized him and said he was stingy. So today again on Facebook, I read a post where a particular lady who was 36, who worked in NHS, I think it's the UK, started helping out her family because relationships were not working for her. She decided to spend money on her family. But eventually, during her younger sister's wedding, her mom insisted that she should renovate the house in the village and she refused. So one of those situations, they had exchanged words and her mom angrily threw her phone away without hanging up. And then she overheard her sister saying, she acts like she is God. She's always playing God. And her mother said, yeah, don't mind that stupid girl, that stupid child of mine. That is why she's not married at her age. She's now 43 and she has one child and she cut them off. Now, this brought my attention to what I'd read recently. We encourage different relationship styles. There are different relationship styles. There's dependent, there's independent, there's codependent, there's interdependent, there's counterdependent. We decide what kind of relationship we build. For people who we say are entitled, a lot of times we encourage that behavior. Because there was this guy, Robert Lupton. He had been a missionary for like 40 years, and he did a study about how churches go about gifting, helping communities and all that stuff. And then I think he came up with the concept of toxic charity or toxic gifting, like I want to call it. It explains that when you gift someone or when you do a charity to somebody the first time, the person feels appreciation. And when you do it the second time, charity, the person is not giving back. Let's not forget that. The person feels anticipation. When you do the third time, the person now feels expectation. When you do the fourth time, the person feels entitlement. And when you do it the fifth time, the person feels dependency. So, as the gifter or the one giving the charity, you've created a dependent person. You also created an entitled person who is probably now dependent on you. And of course, when you don't gift after that, all hell is let loose. But what some people don't talk about is, even as the gifter, the person doing the charity, you also go through some stages of feelings. So when you gift that first time free of charge without anything coming back, when that person feels appreciation, you feel something. You feel exhilaration, excited. When you give the second time free of charge and that person begins to feel anticipation, you begin to feel purpose. Oh my God, I have a purpose. I got something to do. This is what God has chosen me to do. I feel like this is something I can do. When you give the third time free of charge to the same person or group of people, they begin to feel what? Expectation. You know what you feel? You feel necessary. Like, necessary. Necessary to these people. And when you do it the fourth time, they begin to feel entitlement. That is where a lot of us complain, oh, these people are entitled. There's a sense of entitlement. But do you know what you feel at that time? You feel essential. You feel very necessary. And when you do that the fifth time, it creates dependency. They begin to feel dependency. And then you begin to feel paternalism, which is another way of saying you begin to play God because you begin to feel superior. You begin to think you have the right to call shots in their life. Now, I'm saying this because sometimes we are quick to blame just the receivers and say, hey, these people are entitled. But we create those entitlements. The same thing can be seen with the parental relationship, because the word paternalism is from pater, to father. When you have a child and you raise a child to the point where the child at a certain age doesn't begin to reciprocate or give back, that child becomes entitled. So one of the solutions, according to Robert, was, instead of gifting people, sometimes do with them. Me personally, I would say, find a way to receive value for the value you're adding. Oh, we're going to give you this, but how about you do this? If you create a sense of responsibility, it's going to be hard for people to be entitled. One of the ways could also be, instead of giving out the money for free, why don't you give it out as a loan? But even at that, I've tried it before, and I realized that the people I gave the loans to felt entitled to the money that I gave them. They didn't have any remorse when they used the money for something else. So I think it's really in drawing the boundaries from the beginning. Because now that I'm thinking about it, the people that I given loans to do something and they used it for something else and then had the audacity to come back to me to ask for more, I encourage that. Because when they paid back, I gave them back the money. So that created a sense of entitlement. So sometimes we encourage entitlement and then we blame people for being entitled. So if you're out there, whether you're the giver or the receiver, make sure that people put in the effort. You or the other party or the other group of people put in some amount of effort. The same could be found in romantic relationships as well. A guy is dating a girl. Let me use the Nigerian culture, for example. And then the girl comes the first time, makes food for him. Oh, thank you so much. That was so good. She comes the second time, makes food for him, free of charge. He's not bringing money. He begins to create anticipation. By the time she does it the third time, he now begins to expect every time she comes to make food for him. And when she does it the fourth time, it now becomes an entitlement. Every time she comes, she has to make food. Now, when he knows she's going to come every Wednesday, he becomes dependent on her cooking. And when she doesn't do it when she shows up, he gets angry, irritated, or pissed. She has created a dependent human being. Now, let's reverse the roles. The same with women. A man is dating a lady, and then he gives her the first time. She begins to feel, that's nice. And then the second time, now she begins to anticipate. The third time, she begins to expect that it's what you're supposed to do. When you do it the fourth time, she becomes entitled. And then if you do the fifth time, of course, she becomes dependent on you. Now, I'd like to reiterate that the healthiest style of relationship is the interdependent relationship, where both people are responsible and they contribute to the best of their ability to the relationship. They are both committed to the relationship. It's not one-sided. They invest in the relationship while they maintain their individuality. It's different from codependent relationship, where it might start off as interdependent, but eventually it begins to be one-sided, and one person is giving so much, the other person starts becoming dependent on the other person, where if the person is not available, some things could not be done anymore. But of course, dependent is, way worse. Dependent is usually very one-sided. Like, how we just talked about toxic charity or toxic gifting. That's how we create dependent human beings. That's how we groom dependent relationships. But independent relationships are even worse, because you have a guy or a girl, people who want to be together, businesses who are independent on their own, the employee, the employer. If they're not invested in themselves, if the employer doesn't say, I'm going to pay you this amount of money every month, and you're going to have to do this every month, let's be committed. You add value, I add value to you. It's going to be more like a voluntary work. And we know that when it's voluntary, the intern can decide to call out because he or she is not being paid. And then the employer has no right to be angry because the intern is volunteering free of charge, like pro bono, to do the job. So the next time before you give something to somebody free of charge, make sure that you're trying to create a way of making the person responsible, a way to give back, to add back value in one way or another, so that that is not really a free gift. Now, I'm not saying we should not give free gifts. Of course, you can give charities to people. But there's this favorite saying, teach a hungry person to fish instead of giving the person a fish. So when you give a fish, the person eats it and comes back for more. But when you teach the person to fish, guess what? The person begins to fish and will not have to come back to you. So next time, before we are quick to say, oh, they're entitled, let's ask ourselves, are we sure we're not playing God in a way to this person? Am I beginning to feel superior to this person? Do I now think that I have the final say and they don't have autonomy over their lives anymore? If you can keep asking yourself this question, you find yourself trying to encourage some sort of giving back system where if a gift is received, something is given back. If something is received, something is given back. That way it becomes value added for value added. I hope this helps somebody out there. Let me know what you think in the comment section.